Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from United Way of Greater Rochester and the Finger Lakes, serving the community for more than 100 years, dedicated to creating a future where everyone's basic needs are met so all can thrive. More at unitedwayrocflx.org.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Racquel Stephen. Rochester is getting ready for the Pride Parade and Picnic this coming Saturday. The celebration will take place in a year when there have been a record number of bills proposed to limit transgender rights. This hour, we're talking about what it's like to be transgender here in Rochester and across the country. We'll explore what it means to live openly and authentically as a trans person today, in a moment where visibility is growing, but so is political scrutiny. From healthcare to housing, from schools to sports, transgender people are at the center of national debates and often under threat. We'll talk about the real day-to-day experiences of trans people in our community, the challenges, the joys, the relationships, the milestones, and how national narratives impact their lives on a local level. Today, I'm joined in studio by Javannah Davis. Javannah is the founder and president of Wave Women, Inc. I also have with me Brittan Hardges. Correct? Hardges, right? Yeah, peace. Brittan Hardges is the president of the Next Generation Men of Transition and is advocacy director for New Pride Agenda. And I have Rocco Vallerand here with me as the founder of the Support Alliance for Fairness and Equality for Transgender Youth. And a little later in the show, we'll be joined by Juliana Horowitz. She's the Associate Director of Social and Demographic Trends Research for Pew Center for Research. And we invite your comments and questions as well. Whether you're someone who is part of the trans community, a family member, a friend, or just trying to better understand what's at stake, we invite you into this conversation. You can call us at 1-844-295-TALK. That's 8255. Or at 585-263-9994, or you can email us at connections@wxxi.org or comment in the chat section in our YouTube channel. And we're live and you guys look great, okay? Let's dive right in. Can we just start with each of you telling us a bit about your journey and what being transgender means to you personally and what that experience has looked like here in Rochester? Rock, paper, scissors. Whoever wants to go first.
I guess I'll
Javannah?
go first.
Yes.
As you stated, my name is Javannah Davis. I'm so used to introducing myself.
Did I do a good job?
You did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Thank you, sister. So my experience transitioning was actually a positive one. Here in Rochester. Yeah. And the fact that I had a positive experience, that was my main motivator to the advocacy and community work that I do. Because, they say with great power comes great responsibility. And the blessings that were given to me, I knew that I had a responsibility and a calling to use those gifts, use those blessings as a conduit for my community. Yes. Because everyone's story is not like that. And I know several people whose story is not like that. Mm-hmm. So if just being that beacon of light and offering that glimmer of hope to someone, it means so much. I've always worked in healthcare. I've been in healthcare for over 20 plus years. I'm a nurse. So healthcare is my first love. So that's where I got my start in advocacy, was through healthcare. So that's something near and dear to my heart, and it opened doors for me to make new relationships, new friendships, and actually learning things about myself that I didn't know. Yeah. Because I transitioned very late in life. I didn't transition till I was 37.
Wow. Okay.
So, and I had never been a part of the community. It was just, my family, my godchildren, and work, home. That's it. But time I started this advocacy work in the healthcare system, it opened my eyes to so many different things, so many different people, and it gave me a sense of purpose to know that this is what I was led to do, and what the purpose of my life is.
And you mentioned that your transition was a positive one.
Mm-hmm.
When you say that, what are you alluding to? Positive, aside from negative, what does a positive transition experience look like?
Everything just fell into place. From my mother on down to the lady at the DMV for my name change, it was a positive experience. I remember telling my mom, and she pretty much said, I thought you would do this blank in middle school. You have always been my daughter. So those types of things, especially coming from a parent, that means the world to someone of trans experience. I transitioned my first year. In my first year, again, everything fell into place. I got my name change, gender marker change, everything changed by the following year. So I went into the new year as the new me, and accepting myself, because the whole part of this transition was me hindering myself throughout my life. And then once I said yes to myself, that's when the world began to open up for me.
That's great, Javannah. Thank you for sharing that. Brittan, talk about your transition experience, and was it a positive one?
I am thankful to be exactly where I am. I am thankful to be exactly where I am today. I won't say that my transition was positive, but I am thankful for the folks that I had in my life who continually have stood by me. I am thankful for community. And when I think about my actual physical transition, because a lot of times we don't talk about, we talk a lot about a physical transition, but I have been transitioning since I was a youth. And I think that that's really something important to highlight. I can remember knowing and feeling that I just wasn't a lesbian, but there were no words, and I didn't see black or brown trans men in my community, maybe one or two, and definitely no one in advocacy. So when I think about it, without even getting into like the whole story, I realized that one of the slogans of my actual organization is I chose me to survive. And by choosing me to survive, I chose my community. And that's how I look at advocacy. When I think about next generation minute transition, I think about how there were 4 or 5 of us in the beginning, and now we're talking about 30 to 35 black men, like changing the narrative, truly learning the value of self-worth, and really changing the definition of advocacy. And when I think about advocacy, we all have been able to advocate for something, and we're actually living in a time where folks are able, like, learning to advocate not only for themselves, but for a generation that I haven't seen. So when I think about the work that I do every day, it's for the current generation that's here, but the generation that I've never seen yet. And so, like, I'm just so thankful that in choosing myself, I was able to choose people that I've never met. I've been able to choose people that don't live in this country. I've been able to choose people that live in this state and across our nation, and it gives me goosebumps because that self-love, that self-preservation, like, even though it all wasn't positive, I am truly a beacon of the positivity that I went through, of the things that I went through.
That's powerful, Brittan. That's powerful. Turning your pain into purpose.
Yes,
that's
definitely
powerful. And Rocco, I want to get to you. Tell me about your experience transitioning.
Well, similar to Javannah, I transitioned late in life. I was probably about 38, I think, and it was just kind of one of those things where I didn't know how to define it. You know, I was a lesbian too, and before then, I had a kid. I was a single parent, and I didn't know what it was. You know, thank God the internet was coming out, and I started looking stuff up, and I started joining like these AOL groups, you know, about transgender, and I was like, that's me. Oh my God, that's me.
Yeah.
So I went I was living in Florida at the time, and at that time you have to go to 2 years of therapy, you have to see a specialist, all this stuff. So I did. I jumped through all the hoops, and after about 2 years, my kid was probably about 12 by this time, and they knew, and they were whatever, fine, whatever you want to do, I support you. And we had my mother suddenly passed. And this was in February of 2009. And for something that she died of, it could very well be passed on to me. And it's something that kills you when you're in your 60s. It's a whole story. Yeah. So all of a sudden I was left with this feeling of, if I've only got about a good, 20-something years left, I'm going to start this now. Yeah. And of course, by then I had already been given the green light. So it was probably about 5 months after my mom passed, I got my first injection and threw up in the doctor's office because I was just so terrified. Right. It was like, here we go. There's no turning back, Unfortunately, because of the complications with my mom passing and then me doing this, my family was very angry with me. Yeah. And they thought it was a really crappy time for me to do it. I thought it was a great time. Yeah. So they didn't speak to me for about 15 years. We have just started speaking again. Wow. But it wasn't just specifically for the they say, it was just, the whole thing was just really bad timing is basically what they said. So I struggled. My kid and I, we were almost homeless. I was just trying to get a job, work, go through my transition, my therapy and all that. I was blessed to always have very good people in my life, though, that they didn't care who I was, And then finally what brought me up to Rochester was I did have one sibling, my oldest sister, who is a lesbian, who was there for me the whole time. And she just finally said, well, why don't you just come up here she lives in Webster, if you're going to struggle down there, why don't you struggle up here with family? And I was like, oh. So I was almost kind of given a reset button to where when I came up here, I was Rocco, period. I wasn't Racquel turning into Rocco.
What? That one just flew from my head.
I don't know what that is. I just like your name. I'm just going to use it. But you know what I'm saying? So it was like I was able to actually kind of grow here, and I've grown into, I guess, manhood.
Yeah. I'm loving these stories because each story is very different, but similar in a sense where you created a community, right? If you didn't have that support initially, you created that support system. Mm-hmm. So these stories are very similar, but I want to talk about for Black transgender people, right? And especially Black trans women, Javannah, the risk of violence, discrimination, and invisibility is even higher. Can you talk about how race and gender identity intersect?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because when Rocco was speaking, I stated that my transition was positive on the surface because as a Black woman of trans experience, you have to take into account those intersections. Yes. Not only are you trans, but you're a woman in this country. You're also Black in this country. Yes. And that dynamic of being a Black woman, period, it can be an overall negative experience in this country. Yes. So those are things I had to navigate through. And as I picked up the mantle of my womanhood, I had to also pick up the legacy of my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and so on and so forth. Because now I am carrying on a lineage of Black women who have always been beaten down by society and yet have been the backbone of the community.
Yes.
So as a Black trans woman, I do sit here as not a danger, but I am endangered. Because as a Black trans woman, I walk out as soon as somebody knows that I'm trans, that automatically makes me a target. And that's why it's a fight every day for me to advocate and be so face-fronting in my community because that puts a target on my back. When it comes to dating and relationships, that's a whole nother conversation that we could probably have 2 hours on. But these are things, and then you have to deal with the stereotypes of being a Black trans woman. Automatically, people go to sex work, not really doing anything with their lives, but wanting to walk around, be pretty, and all this other stuff. And I've never had to sell my body, but I know, and I don't dismiss those who have, because it is a part of survival. Sex work is work, and to be able to go through something like that, and not and living up to that, not having to fight against that stereotype, that can be a challenge as well. So yeah, being a Black trans woman, it is so many parts to that puzzle that has to be put together, that it's a struggle every day. Just waking up every day is a revolutionary act. Walking out of my house is activism, even if I don't even open my mouth. So being a Black woman, period, walking out of my house is a revolutionary act. So those are things that you go through every day and fight against continuously, even when it doesn't even look like you're fighting.
Yeah. And for Brittan and Rocco, trans men, the Black trans men experience, right? Is there more acceptance with the white trans man than the Black trans man? Is there more acceptance with trans man versus trans women? Like, what are we seeing culturally? What is as far as acceptance?
I'll jump in first. I think I want to piggyback on something that Javannah said, but I want to expand it a little bit. Being Black and trans is a revolutionary act. I think that in conversations like these, it's something that we're actually working through as a community. In conversation like these, I think that most people like to dive in to the difference in violence between trans women and trans men. I think we need to just focus on the fact that there is violence, like literally knocking at our doors. The attacks are at our doors. And I say that because just less than 6 years ago, there was a Black trans man who was attacked for just being Black, trans, and queer on Garson Avenue. And we just watched what happened to Sam Nordquist in our own backyard. So I think that when we talk about the violence that perpetrates our community, we need to talk about it in an overall fascist that is inclusive of everybody's hurt, everybody's harm, and really be able to focus on harm reduction. Because I think that when we talk about trans people in general, it's still being dissected as if there is one worse than the other, when we are completely being attacked from our own communities, from the L, the G, the B, to cisgender folks, to organizational abuse. Like, there's so many levels of abuse that I think that we just need to talk about, like, the violence that, like, literally perpetrates our community in general. And one thing that, like, I want to say in regards to, you know, like, Black trans men, I don't have Rocco's same experience, but we can talk about this. And like Javannah was saying, this could take like another 2 hours, but a lot of people don't acknowledge the fact that Black trans men were once Black women. Yeah. So when we talk about how being a Black woman is a revolutionary act, people don't understand the backlash that we get for putting down our womanhood to become strong, powerful men because of the rhetoric of Black men. So of course me and Rocco's experience are going to be different, because right now, do we really see superiority and hierarchy in cis Black men? So I can be a prominent leader in my community, but I look no different than someone who is living a different life from me that is standing on the side of the street selling drugs. It is what it is. I'm a Black man. I am not going to have the same opportunities that Rocco has as a white man, because white cis men have opportunities that I will never see or I'll never get to experience. So I think that when we talk about so many of those things, it actually allows us to think about where we are in the temperature of Rochester, where there is truly, and we have to be honest, there is an acceptance of white transness and then a tolerance of black transness in Rochester. And I think that's something that we have to address, because we already know that there is a cultural divide before even using terminology like trans.
Yeah.
So I think that like we just have to stand there and just say that like we know that this happens culturally between cisgender people, biological people, whatever terminology you want to use. So why would it be any different in a subcategory such as being transgender? Yes.
Rocco, I would like you to respond as far as your experience as a white trans man.
Well, you know, I agree with you 100% on that, and the reason why I do is because you're black first.
Yeah.
You are already at a disadvantage. I'm sorry, that's the way the world is, and it really sucks. Pardon my French, really stinks.
Yeah, it's okay. We can say stuff
okay.
on here.
I also know that I have certain privileges now that I didn't have when I was a white female. I am the face of America in some ways without the money. So here I am, just this white dude. You know what I'm saying? If people don't, you know, and even when they find out I'm trans, it's usually not that big of a deal. The only experience, I will never experience anything of what you guys, not even close, but I do remember my child definitely looks black. And I remember when they were younger, because they're biracial, but they definitely are all black. How I was treated going into different places with my child, as opposed to when they were in daycare and I would go in the same place, and how I was treated. And I was like, that's just a taste. I know it was just a taste, but it was just like, wow. Can you imagine every single day, you know, having to go through that? I can't.
Yeah.
I'm sitting on privilege, and I know that. Even though I almost died getting here, really. But I also know that because I'm sitting with this privilege, that gives me a lot of power.
Yeah.
And I can get away with a heck of a lot more than some people do. So I try it. I push the limits. I do. I test the
I love your
system.
honesty.
Yeah.
It's refreshing.
You know, because it's the truth.
Yes.
You know, and when my wife and I walk out and go places, we just look like a white couple.
Yeah.
So I don't have to worry about my safety. Yeah. You know, I worry about your guys' safety all the time. I'm always looking out, and it scares me.
Yeah.
Because I'm for all the people.
Yeah.
You know, but I just know that I could really take advantage of where I'm sitting.
Yeah. So I want to transition. And let's talk about what's happening outside of Rochester on a national level, right? Lawmakers in 28 states are considering nearly 100 bills that target transgender rights, many of them aimed at youth. What do you see as the real world impact of these proposals, especially on the mental health of young people? If you just want to react to all these legislations right now that are targeting transgender people.
Well, I do know it's significantly more than the number you just gave. It's almost close up to 800 throughout the country. So dealing with these laws that are trying to be passed in legislature right now, it's taxing for those that we love and care about in different states.
Yes.
Because Brittan and I travel all over the country, and we meet so many different people, and we see firsthand how it affects our trans siblings.
So the number is definitely higher. Just to piggyback off what Javannah said, I think, but again, like I try to be as optimistic as possible. I think that we spend a lot of time talking about how many bills, anti-trans bills, are coming out per year, and we're not talking about the fact that most of them don't move. And that is what builds the resilience in our community. And when I think about it nationally, when I think about Black trans people nationally, they are not uprooting from their homes.
Yes.
They are truly like the legacy of Marsha, of Sylvia, of Lorena, of James Baldwin. Like, we're not going anywhere because we've always been here. So even last year, like, we saw over 600 bills that were literally came out across our country, and maybe 200 of them passed. So it lets you know that no matter what the rhetoric is about trans people, that we are resilient and we are going to continue to show up and we are going to continue to fight. And I think the most powerful part of that is you mentioned mental health. This is definitely affecting people's mental health. And we know that across our nation, we don't have enough mental health providers. But what this is doing is allowing people to go back to community and build within community and show up for each other. I've been saying this for the last 2 to 3 years, that it's time for queer folks to reimagine and recreate what an underground railroad looks like. So even though our siblings in the South are strong and they're resilient and they're stand fast and standing still, if they needed to migrate to safe haven states such as Connecticut, such as New York, what does it look like and how do we build the resources in our backyard? We also know, Rocco said it firsthand, I'm from Florida, but somebody told me that this space was safe. And I came here. I haven't been here 5 years, but I'm here. I'm thriving. I'm building community. I sit in rooms with Javannah and Brittan. I'm learning what my power looks like. Yes. And I think that when we talk about like what's going on nationally, we forget that in the wake of an attack, and when we think about in the wake of an attack, we've always been attacked. But we don't sit down and we don't hide. And also we can't do those things because there are youth coming behind us that need to see a Javannah, that need to see a Brittan, that need to see a Rocco, the same way that we had Marsha, Sylvia, and the list goes on and on and on. So I think that's just really big to talk about.
And it's just to add to that, as Black people and what we've been through throughout history, we have always been resilient. We've always come out, gathering our community, gathering our people, and getting through whatever challenges we are facing. So, and that's no different in the trans community, because no matter what, we're always going to be that safe haven for each other in whatever way we can. So no matter what laws are passed, no matter what bills are trying to be pushed in the Senate, we're going to always be here for each other and always be here to fight for one another. Mm-hmm. And that, I just feel that's just a cultural thing, even when it comes to white trans folks. I hear a lot that white parents will tell their children, if you're ever in trouble, find a Black woman. Mm-hmm. Or if you can't find a Black woman, find a Black man. Because Black people will make sure that you're all right in the darkest of days. Mm-hmm. Even though, all skin folk ain't kinfolk, but that is something that you rarely see when it comes to something like this of community building and togetherness.
Yeah. Now, I want to bring another voice into the conversation. Someone who can help us understand the broader public attitudes towards the trans people. Her name is Juliana Horowitz, and she's Associate Director of Social and Demographic Trends Research for Pew Center for Research. And the Pew Center has conducted research on public attitudes towards LGBTQ plus and transgender Americans. And do I just hit the line? Oh, she's on. Juliana.
Hi.
Hi. How are you? Thank you for
Good,
holding. Thank you for your patience, Juliana. I want to talk about what the Pew Center has discovered based on this research. The Pew released a new study looking at the public opinion around gender identity. Juliana, what stood out to you most in the findings?
Right. First, I wanted to say that I really appreciated listening to the conversation that you were just having, because in addition to surveying the public, we also did a large survey of LGBTQ adults, and so much of what I was hearing in this conversation really resonates based on the findings that we have among trans adults in our nationally representative survey of LGBTQ adults. And so I appreciated listening to some of that conversation. In terms of the general public, we did a survey about 3 years ago and repeated some of the questions just a few months ago. And we asked U.S. adults whether they favor or oppose a series of laws and policies aimed at trans issues. And one of the things that we found was that a majority of adults, and actually a growing share of adults, favor policies that would impose more restrictions on trans people. And so, as there have been more conversations about these topics in the national debate, things are actually trending in a way that is less positive towards trans people. So, for example, Americans are now more supportive of policies that would require trans athletes to compete on teams that match their sex at birth. They're also more supportive of policies that would make it illegal for healthcare professionals to provide minors with medical care for a transition. More supportive of laws that require trans people to use bathrooms that match their sex at birth. And we see that both for Democrats and Republicans. I mean, to be sure, there's a wide partisan gap, and Republicans are particularly supportive of these restrictive policies. But we're seeing a growth in support for these policies among both Democrats and Republicans compared to 3 years ago.
So what are you seeing as far as the reasons behind this shift, Juliana?
Well, so we didn't probe on that. We didn't ask people about that. One of the things that we did find about 3 years ago when we did a larger survey looking at lots of questions related to gender identity is that many people, again, both Republicans and Democrats, and particularly older adults, felt that things were moving more quickly than, moving too fast for them when it comes to these topics. And so that's one of the things that we saw. But we also do know that there has been more just more in the public discourse about these things. And so, that's one of the things that we need to understand a little bit more. We haven't done as much research on this as we can, but I think one of the things that I would like to probe deeper on in future research is what are the messages they're hearing, whether it's in the media or from politicians, where are they hearing them, what's the tone of those messages and how that impacts how people respond to these policies.
And Juliana, when the Pew Center compares this to how Americans feel about the broader LGBTQ plus community, particularly gay and lesbian people, are you seeing a gap in support for trans people versus other groups?
Well, so we didn't directly ask the public about that, but we did ask in the LGBTQ survey, we did ask people whether, the extent to which they think that our society in general accepts people today who are gay or lesbian, bisexual, non-binary, and transgender. And it was really interesting because most LGBTQ adults say that there is a great deal or a fair amount of support for people who are gay or lesbian. And about half said that there was support, social acceptance for people who are bisexual, but only 13% said that they think that there's a great deal or a fair amount of social acceptance in this country today for people who are trans, and 14% said this for people who are non-binary. And one thing that's interesting is that when we ask people how they think support for each of these groups has changed compared to 10 years ago, most people, about 60% or more, say for each of these groups that now there's more social acceptance than there was 10 years ago. But and it's so interesting that even though people think that there's more social acceptance for trans people, they still only 13% say that there's a lot of acceptance today, which gives you a sense of where people think things were 10 years ago. Yes. And then we also ask people to look ahead. And again, most people think that there will be more support for trans people 10 years from now. But again, that doesn't mean that they think there will be a lot of support. They just mean that they think there will be more than there is now, and they see such low support right now.
Mm-hmm. Juliana, is anything in that research really stood out to you?
Well, one of the things that really stood out to me in the survey of LGBTQ adults is that they're, and again, echoing some of what I heard in the previous conversation you were having with your guests, that, trans adults, among those who are out to their family, they're much less likely than gay, lesbian, and bisexual adults to say that their parents, siblings, and extended members of their family have been accepting of them. And they're also more likely to have experienced things like fearing for their safety or, saying they've been treated poorly by healthcare professionals. So one thing that's interesting to me is that we also asked questions about the extent to which LGBTQ adults feel like they're part of a broader LGBTQ community, and the extent to which being LGBTQ is a central part of how they think of themselves and, their overall identity. And trans people are more likely than gay, lesbian, bisexual people to say that they feel like they're part of a broader community, and to say that that's part of their, that's central to how they see themselves as people. And one thing that's interesting, just thinking about the literature, the research in social science, that, groups that tend to feel more threatened, right, to have experienced more discrimination, to have more of these negative experiences, often do have a stronger connection to a group. It often makes that identity more salient to them. And we really see that in the research that we did.
Okay, Juliana, I want to thank you so much for joining us and providing that insight and giving us depth into your research at the Pew Research Center. We will actually take a quick break and we'll be back. We're talking about Pride Month here in Rochester and the transgender community.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Mary Cariola Center, providing education and life skills solutions designed to empower individuals and the families of those with complex disabilities. Mary Cariola Center, transforming lives of people with disabilities. More at marycariola.org.
I'm Racquel Stephen. You're listening to Connections from WXXI. If you're just joining us, I'm joined in studio by Javannah Davis. She's the founder and president of Wave Women, Inc. Brittan, Hardges, president of the Next Generation Men of Transition and Advocacy, director for New Pride Agenda. And Rocco Vallerand is the founder of the Support Alliance for Fairness and Equality for Transgender Youth. Now, before we went to break, we heard from Juliana Horowitz. She is one of the researchers over at the Pew Research Center, and they did a whole survey about public acceptance for the transgender community. And I wanted you, Rocco, to respond to what you've heard Juliana discuss before break.
Well, a lot of it was more directed towards adults. Yeah. And I think that it's really important. I know there's a lot, dealing with youth,
yes,
under 18, it's whole other, can of worms because of laws and things like that. You have to be very careful. And of course, parents are paramount with making sure that, that when you work with kids that they're okay with it. Yeah. So as far as statistics are concerned, I would say, for the adults, some of those surprised me. Just the feeling of the disconnection here and there. But I think we need to focus a lot more on the kids in some ways. Just because at this point, they're looking at everything going on right now and they're going, well, what's the point? My kid lives in Arizona and we had to talk about this about a month ago. And they're non-binary, but they present, some days they present as male and some days they present however they feel,
yeah,
which they should be able to. And when we were talking about everything going on, my kid said to me, you know what, Dad, I think I'm just going to go ahead and go back into the closet for a while. And I'm just going to look like I'm supposed to look. Because and it was like, that's probably one of the most heartbreaking things. Mm-hmm. But they were so okay with it. Yeah. But as a parent, I think it's one of the most heartbreaking things that you can ever hear somebody say. Yeah. They're older, they're in their 20s. But as a child, you see all this stuff going on and you're like, right, what's the point? The suicide rates have gone up, depression, just with the schools and having to tread so lightly because some of these parents are ridiculous. Mm. And a lot of these parent groups that are there for family and American values are basically nothing more than pushing their agendas, their, Christian nationalist agendas. To make everybody we want everybody to be the same. We don't need this. You don't need to teach my kid about, gender roles and things like that. And it never was a problem before until the current administration, even 8 years ago started talking about it, and then all of a sudden parents went, oh, wait a minute. So it's kind of like this red herring in some ways. Distraction is one of the biggest things that the administration is doing right now with everything, so that they can get away with this. They're going to focus on this and with, whatever pleases them. I did want to bring up a point too, in regards to, I am so sick of hearing about whether or not trans females should be allowed in sports. And the reason why I'm sick of it is because they never, ever once complain about a trans male being in a sport. Mm-hmm. So already, again, being a woman, and having to, just having to deal with that. I always say the same thing. You want to go back to regular bathrooms? Okay, I'll see you in the girls' room because I'm still female. No surgeries. So it's like, how would you feel if I went into the bathroom, then into the female bathroom? Like, they're not thinking. They're just like these lemmings that are just following whatever's being said and whatever is the hot topic at the moment. So it's misogynistic. It's more geared towards women, especially Black women, trans women. I know I'm getting a little off topic, but I had to say my piece on that. But I think I'm really just concerned with the youth, because I feel like some of them may feel hopeless, and I want us to be able to stand and go, hey, look, we made it. We did it. Yeah. And I did it in a time, 2008, 2007, where they didn't even know what that was. I didn't even know what it was.
Yeah. I have a question for Rocco and Javannah, because you both transitioned later in life, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think there is a time where it's too early to transition? Maybe people say where you're just going through something.
Absolutely,
you're just going through a phase.
Absolutely not. A child knows who they are at a very young age. I knew who I was at a very young age, but I held me back. Mm-hmm. So I believe that's definitely a family decision, and I feel like the parents should definitely listen to their children when they say these types of things, because it's not just in their head, because a child knows who they are. They might suppress it. They might do like we did and wait a little later in life, but it's there, and it should not be taken lightly.
And I agree. I actually, I was on the fence about that for a long time, because I also work in the mental health field. Yes. And I'm kind of like, okay, so where does this start? Where does this begin? Nature versus nurture, yada, da, da, da. Until I met a family who has a transgender child who transitioned fairly young, because from the age of 2 on, they were insistent that they were male. Now, this family never even, you're talking about a middle-class white family, they're not talking about this at the dinner table. Mm. So it's not like they can influence somebody. And it was a shock to them. And thank God, as good parents, they decided to learn everything they could. Let's do therapy. Let's learn everything we can. And now this child is thriving as a teenager. So once, you hear stuff like that, you hear about it all the time. These little kids are like, when I was a little kid, I was like, I'm a boy. I had the haircut. I did as much as I could get away with, and my mother was very supportive of that. Like when I cut all my hair off, I had, and I was like 7 or 8 years old, and I loved it. I just loved that feeling. I couldn't put a name on it. I couldn't figure out what it was, but I knew it was something, and I just knew I wasn't in the right body, and I was just always wondering, well, why did God, put me in the wrong body? I don't understand this. So I think you're right. I think I do agree that there are some any teenager, they like to go along, and it could be a phase or a fad or things like that. A parent knows, and if you don't know, take your kid to therapy and figure it out, and go to family therapy, and learn about that if you have the means to do so. So I do believe that all bets are off. It could be any age. It could be anything. And if you're just a good parent, you're going to do everything you can to support your child and just make sure that they're living a healthy life.
Being trans and the action of transitioning, we're not a monolith. It's always going to be different for everyone in their transition, and it's going to look different for everyone. We might have similar experiences, but it's going to have different experiences every time. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Now, as far as this month, we're here doing this because this month is Pride Month here in Rochester. What do you think Pride Month or this weekend will look like now with all this political scrutiny happening around transgender people?
Well, I was at the flag raising last night over, I can't remember the name of the park, forgive me, for the LGBT, or all-inclusive flag, where the mayor was and some assemblymen and women and whatnot. And the level of security,
Wow.
I would never experienced before. They looked like they were working for the president, and they were standing here and here, and their job was to just keep looking around. And I was like, oh yeah, that is where we live now, isn't it? That's the kind of. So I'm hoping to see. I'm sad that we have to see a lot more security, and a lot more of, my wife and I, we joke at home all the time. If you see something, say something, but it's really true. I think the difference this year is going to be safety. I think that there's still going to be joy, and there's going to be celebration, and half of the people are going to be oblivious to anything else. And because this is the only time maybe they get to wear what they want and do what they want and come out and be a part of a beautiful, loving community. But I think that safety is always with everything going on right now, it's scary.
And I think these events we're having, safety needs to be a priority and needs to be taken seriously by these organizations that are throwing these events, because it can be a bad situation if you don't have the right security with a large group of people who is basically targeted by certain folks in the community.
So as you're celebrating this month, are you scared?
I'm not afraid. I'm never afraid.
No.
Hell no. But I'm aware, and I have situational awareness, and I look out for everybody that I can. No, I don't scare that easily.
Ooh.
I was going to say, I don't think that mine comes down to fear or being scared. I think that when I think of this Pride season, I think about education. I think about language. Because when we're talking about fear, and it's just like a challenging rebuttal, but like trans folks don't feel safe in LGBTQ plus spaces because there are lesbians, gays, and bisexuals that don't believe that we should exist and exist in their spaces. Yep. So even when we're talking about safety and protection, you can be in the same park and not feel safe with the same folks that quote unquote you share community with. So I think that this year we need to really talk about education and language. We talked a lot here about transitioning, and the previous question was like, is there an age where like is there an age limit to transitioning? And I don't think that we spend enough time. I think that we have like a lot of these very rare surface conversations, but we're not talking about what a transition entails. If a transition is truly just allowing an 8-year-old to go to therapy and socially express themselves, that's a transition. I think when we're talking about transitioning, and again, like when I think about what Juliana was saying about the research, it's the lack of education, it's the lack of language knowledge, because there would be someone who was born in 1945 that thinks that transition is completely wrong if you're always talking about hormone replacement therapy and surgeries. We're not talking about being in community and socially engaging. We're not talking about therapy to talk through these things. We're not having those conversations, and I think that when people have transition conversations, it's just the bare minimum. People will walk away from listening to this radio segment and not truly know the multiple ways that someone can transition, and that is why people's safety is at risk, and that's why people don't feel protected. And those are why we have a lot of even the policies that we're looking at. We have legislators in our very own backyards who are signing off on anti-trans rhetoric but can't tell you the difference between a trans man and a trans woman. We're having people sign bathroom bans, but you do not want to see me in a bathroom with your daughter. But you're signing these things without having the knowledge, the education, and being equipped to actually know what you're voting on and who you're protecting. Also, again, like Rocco, you always talk about youth, and I love being able to bring up youth. But when I think about like what we need to do in our city and to protect our youth in our city, we just saw what happened less than 6 months ago at one of our very own high schools. We've seen what happened to Kat. Right? But where are the liaisons, the LGBTQ plus liaisons in the school? Because these are not just for queer and trans kids. These are for all kids. Because if I feel like I'm a bully, I would like to go and talk to Miss Rocky and say, Miss Rocky, hey, Rocco is really my friend. And I like Rocco. But at home, we're not allowed to like trans people, or we're not allowed to do these things. Having this support system is not just for queer kids. It's for every child to learn to be a friend and to be a protector for someone that you care about. And that's how we actually grow community and build on community. So this Pride season, I think people should really just stand on education and language and doing the work.
Absolutely.
Well, happy Pride to all of you. And I wish safety on all your events, and I hope you enjoy the weekend. And thank you all for being guests, Javannah, Brittan, Rocco. I really appreciate you guys for joining us and being transparent and vulnerable here in this space.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride. And
Happy Pride,
stay with
everyone.
us for another hour of one of your favorite re-airs of Connections up next.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.